Spook, Chapter 1. "Come on, Spook," said the witch. "Wake up! We mustn't be late for the meeting." But the little black dog curled up on the hearth only huddled closer to himself. "I'm not going," he growled, his eyes pressed tightly shut. "Not going?" said the witch, whose name was Grimalda. "What kind of nonsense is that?" She was sweeping her floor as she spoke, and since the dog would not move, she was obliged to make 2 neat piles on either side of him. Neat but nasty, for the dust of a witch's house is mixed with all manner of unspeakable things that fall from her work table and kettle. These she gathered carefully into a large bottle marked "Spells Left Over," which she corked securely and set on a long shelf among hundreds of others containing magical ingredients. This done, Grimalda turned again to the hearth. "Get up, Spook," she said in a more threatening voice, and gave him a sharp poke with the handle of her broom. Spook jumped to his feet with a faint yelp, and the witch shrieked in delight. Then she leaned her long yellow face down close to his. "Don't you remember what night of all the year this is, sweetheart?" she demanded. "My birthday?" faltered Spook in a low voice. "Your birthday?" cried Grimalda. "Who cares about your birthday? It's Halloween, stupid, Halloween. Have you forgotten what business is afoot for us tonight? What miles we must travel, what mischief we must do before that silly rooster sets off his alarm and the fun is all over for another year?" She spun around sharply on her heels and slapped a dish of cold bat's wings in front of the little dog. Then she sat down at her work table to a bubbling bowl of dark green soup made from boiled young eels, shredded seaweed, and rotted turtle's eggs for herself. Spook sniffed at the leathery things in his dish. "Why don't you keep a cat, like any other witch?" he whimpered. "What kind of life is this for a dog?" "You know why," answered his mistress, dribbling soup off her pointed chin. "Because cats make me sneeze, that's why. Do you think I wouldn't rather fly to the meeting with an elegant black rascal of a cat on the handle than you, slipping and sliding and quaking all the way and likely to be airsick before we get there? Clumsy thing." "Why don't you go by yourself this time?" suggested Spook reasonably. "I can't go to the meeting without a familiar," cried Grimalda, scandalized. "Every witch has to have a familiar. That's one of the first rules. And you're the only animal so far my anti-sneeze spell works on. Eat your food." Spook sighed very deeply and pushed away his untouched plate. He thought his nose felt rather hot. Could he be getting a fever, he wondered hopefully. But Grimalda leaned down suddenly and snatched up his plate, which she hurled, together with her own, into an empty tub that stood by the hearth. Both dishes broke to pieces instantly upon landing in the tub. "Wash!" commanded the witch. "And mend," she added, stamping her foot. A gurgle of soapy water began churning in the bottom of the tub, and the pieces of plate hastily scrambled about in it, trying to fit themselves back together. As Grimalda readied herself for flight, Spook looked about the bare and blackened walls. Just 4 of them that were his home. The witch had no use for more than one room, and everything in it was given over to the making and storing of spells. Over the wide-open throat of the hearth hung her great black kettle, smoldering ashes banked beneath it to keep the horrible thing she brewed forever simmering there. In Grimalda's house there was nothing whatever for comfort or pleasure, and the light was always dim, for a huge, jagged pine outside shadowed the one window by day, and by night the room was lighted only by the hearth and a single candle burning on the witch's work table. This table, with its chair, stood in the center of the room, its top stained red and blue and yellow and black like a bruise. On this, Grimalda ground and mixed her magic powders. Here she studied her moldering books of magic. Here she ate her meals, and here she slept with her head face downward under the high peaked hat she always wore. Spook sighed again and wondered, as he had many times before, if there weren't some other kind of home for him, some other kind of voice than Grimalda's. The thought that there might be was like a secret promise, but since Grimalda never let him free, he had no way of finding out. and try as hard as he would, he could remember nothing before coming to live with the witch. She planted both feet in their buckled shoes and the broom handle before him now. "Climb on, Spook," she commanded. "Climb on and we're away! We're away!" At this, her voice rose to a piercing wail, and Spook mounted the broom handle with trembling paws. "Away!" shrilled the witch again, and the broom handle upended with a sickening lurch, turned abruptly around and shot through the window. The wind skirled like bagpipes in his ears, and stars reeled in glittering streamers round Spook's head in the second before he clamped his eyes shut, clinging miserably to the broom handle with his short, blunt claws. Chapter 2. In a distant cave, guarded by 2 sentinel crows and half hidden on a lonely hillside by thick brambles, the witches were gathering, shrieking to one another and cackling with laughter, their ragged black draperies fluttering wildly about them. Each witch circled the cave once and then swooped through the entrance to join her sisters. And on the handle of each witch's broom rode her familiar, black cats, all of them, except one large green parrot, rusty and tattered with age, and Spook. The heart of the cave lay deep in the hillside, and the passage that led to it was draped with bats hanging upside down in clusters like dark grapes. From its ceiling they peered down curiously at the witches darting along beneath them. Grimalda snatched 1 or 2 as she went by, stuffing them hastily into her wide pockets, for what disagreeable purpose Spook knew only too well. He had no doubt they would be served to him for dinner next day. It was in the cavernous heart of the cave that the witches came together. No light penetrated here at all, but each familiar was ordered to sit on a ledge above its mistress. Together their eyes, magically aglow, made a ring of slanted green lights winking in the gloom, all except those of the parrot, who was blind with age. As Grimalda glided in to take her place among the witches sitting in a circle round the walls of the cave, Spook squeezed against the hem of her skirt. Indeed, he would gladly have crept into her pocket, bats or no bats, as the terrible presence of almost 100 cats hurtled at him like a charge of electricity. The hairs on his back stood upright, and he tried to throttle the growl that rose in his throat. Grimalda settled herself on the floor and bared her scraggy teeth in a smile, first to the witch on her right and then to the one on her left. They both smiled hideously back. Spook hoped with every ounce of his small, shaggy body that no notice would be taken of him. But suddenly Grimalda was hissing in his ear, "Get to your ledge!" And she accompanied the command with a short jab of her bony forefinger. Spook scrambled to the ledge, pressing himself close to the wall as the 2 cats who were his neighbors spat their displeasure. In the center of the cave was a crude chair, cut out of rock and carved with designs of animals and birds twisted about among strange letters and symbols. In this chair sat the head witch, bent forward with immense age, her straggly white hair hanging like fangs on either side of her head under its high peaked hat. She was very still, except for the glitter of her eyes and the occasional twitch of her long curved nose as she watched each witch enter and take her place. Digging his talons into her shoulder to keep his hold sat the blind parrot, for he was her familiar. As head witch, of course, she could do as she pleased, and since she greatly preferred birds to cats, she had long ago taken a parrot for herself. When most of the rustling, hissing, mewing, and cackling had died down, she spoke without rising, her voice like the slow grating of chains across a gravel path. "Greetings to you, little sisters of the night. The sight of all your wicked faces is most welcome to me on this fearsome occasion." Her eyes, piercingly sharp, rested for a moment on the ledge above Grimalda, and a slight frown darkened in them, but she went on. "Once again we gathered to celebrate Halloween. Once again we fly abroad to harry the land, to unsettle the night with mischief. And for each one of you, I have prepared a bag of tricks. But remember, the bags must be emptied, every trick in them used up, before midnight. My sentinels who wait outside will watch carefully and report to me if the night's work is not faithfully done. So make haste, little sisters, make haste. Collect your tricks. Some are merry, some are sad, some are cunning, all are bad. Come get your tricks, get your tricks. At her words, a great excitement bubbled among the witches. They rose from their places with a gabble of voices and began swarming round the head witch, eager to accept the bulging black bag she was handing out. One at a time, she shrilled, grinning with toothless delight until she came to Grimalda. Not so fast, dearie, she said, fastening her hands like claws onto Grimalda's arm. Pretending to be nearsighted, she squinted her eyes in Spook's direction. What is the meaning of that creature I see sitting on the ledge above your place? Do you call that a proper familiar to bring to the meeting? Grimalda, cowering, tried to answer, but the prickling in her nose could be held back no longer. Achoo! Sneezed Grimalda. Achoo! Achoo! What's that? Shrieked the head witch, and the old parrot, who had fallen into a doze on her shoulder, awoke with a squawk and bit her sharply on the ear. At this, she let loose her grip on Grimalda to reach round fiercely and yank at his tail feathers, most of which were already gone. It's the cats, explained Grimalda stuffily. They make me sneeze. Spells won't work on them, only on him. She nodded resentfully at Spook. Nonsense, screeched the head witch. I never heard of such a thing. If you haven't a proper familiar, you should be sent straight home to work on your spells instead of keeping Halloween with the rest of your sisters. However, she glared for a moment in silence. I shall overlook it this time, but see that you come with a proper familiar next Halloween, or don't come at all, even if it takes you all year to discover a suitable spell. She flung a lumpy black bag at Grimalda, who scurried off with it, pausing only to gather up Spook and her broom as she left. Outside the cave, under the watchful eyes of the sentinel crows, Grimalda hastily adjusted Spook and the bag on the handle and rushed headlong into the air. Useless thing, she muttered to Spook, who had clamped his eyes shut as soon as they took off. Grimalda sneezed violently as she spoke, so that the broom, traveling at top speed, swayed dangerously. She sneezed once more and clutched at her teetering bag of tricks with one hand. With the other, she reached for Spook, but her fingers closed on empty air. For below her, Spook was falling round and round and down, his eyes shut, his paws waving helplessly as he went. This story continues on page 19 of the book Spook. Read on.